Just a quick update on the blog Glasstone blogspot.com. I've put a new post on summarising some revisions to the previous one about the invasion of Ukraine. The problem is that Glasstone's book, The Effects of Nuclear Weapons, exaggerates the effects on cities, and it completely omits military effects, but it's called The Effects. What you could call it is a proper Gladstone book. Quite often these things are a question of getting the title right. It's dishonest to call it The Effects of Nuclear Weapons. What it should be called is The Exaggerated Effects of Nuclear Weapons, for lying about cities by claiming that you can take desert, unobstructed desert terrain nuclear test data and apply it to a concrete city, which we know from Hiroshima absorbs the effects. The mortality rate was 50%, a 0.12 mile. On the lower floors of concrete buildings, according to the Glasstone and Dolan book, they don't actually mention the lower floors, but it was the lower floors of those buildings. The upper floors got quite a high radiation dose and it was lethal there. So what you need to do in a nuclear attack, if you're in a concrete building, is get to the lower floors. The concrete buildings are quite likely to survive the blast, even at quite high overpressures, particularly in an airburst. Putting a surface burst for cratering, and that's the effects. It tends to reduce the effects of heat flash because a large amount of the energy is absorbed in the process of producing the crater, so the fireball's less hot, so it radiates less energy. And this is established quite well in nuclear tests, particularly at lower yields, which are most of the warheads today. If you want to put a MEV warhead on a missile where you've got, say, 10 warheads on the missile, they're not going to be 10 megatons each. It's just, particularly for Western designs, they're not that efficient. You can't get that to the yield to mass ratio. So anyway, this is all, we've gone into the whole thing in great detail on the Glasstone blogspot.com site. So the bottom line is, the main lie is the Glasstone Effects of Nuclear Weapons book is completely Russian propaganda from the point of view of what it covers. It doesn't cover what you need to do to stop a world war. After 1940 and 1939, those were invasions. The invasion of Belgium by concentrated military force, the invasion of Poland, concentrated military force. So what you need to do to deter them is to have sort of neutron bombs, that can be airburst at such an altitude you don't get blast and thermal effects on the surface. Which you can do, at very low yields. The neutron effect predominates anyway, even for pure fission weapons. But if you put a fusion capsule in and get a lot of high energy 14 MeV neutrons coming out of it, as Cohen showed, and as the 1972 capabilities of nuclear weapons, DNA EM1 showed, and also the later, that showed 8 types of nuclear warhead design radiation output. That was expanded to 13 types in the current edition, which is supposedly secret, although you can, the actual, I think it's Horizons technology produced a software program giving you all the radiation outputs for all 13 weapons. And for 4 of those weapons, it's all printed in a unclassified, declassified EM1 from 1993, published in edited into a little handbook by John Northrop, called Handbook of Nuclear Weapons Effects, calculation of tools abstracted from the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, or I think at that time it was the Defense Special Weapons Agency, and they keep changing it, every few years, changing the name of it, like changing Windscale to Sellafield. It's the same sort of organization doing the same function, but you can get a bit confused by all the names. But the bottom line is that Glasstone and Dolan don't even mention the neutron bomb, long index. There's nothing about. It's not about the effects of nuclear weapons. It's about nuclear weapons effects propaganda, and it's very, very. You've got to find a couple of tables in it which are useful. One on the survival of concrete arch shelters one on the survival of concrete buildings, in nuclear test or Hiroshima, and the rest of it's just a load of hogwash, a lot of lies, because it applies to unobstructed desert terrain. They knew the effects. The Home Office Scientific Advisory Branch in London had done tests on this. They worked out. Penny had done tests in Hiroshima. He went out to Hiroshima, spent 450 quid. At that time, 1945, flying back to London, all the petrol cans and blueprint containers before the US Strategic Bombing Survey even got there. So they couldn't work out the blast pressures in Hiroshima because Penny had taken all the stuff back to London. But he published it all in the 1970 Royal Society Transactions paper with a couple of colleagues, including the blast attenuation effects, and it was all published. And there you go. It was cited by Gladstone and Dolan, but the findings on blast attenuation by the cumulative loss of energy of the blast as it moves outwards in Hiroshima, and that was just mainly wood frames. It wasn't the modern concrete buildings, which absorb a lot more energy, and you can see the amount of absorption. So I've proved in my blog from the published ductility ratios for severe damage to just the amount of energy absorbed in a building to make it oscillate. It's huge amounts of energy. Oscillating a building might take out 1 or 2% of the blast wave passing by that single building. But if it's close to ground zero, the energy absorbed by causing severe destruction up to the point of almost collapsing the building, that takes about typically more than 10 times that much energy. So you don't need a huge number of buildings to cut that blast pressure down enormously. And the DTRA just ignore this. They just pretend, and so does Aldermaster, and they're all a lot of liars. I've been proving that, Penny proved it, everyone's proved it. It's conservation of energy. You can't cause damage without using up energy, I'm afraid. It's contravention of the laws of physics. This is well-established stuff. It's not speculative or controversial. That is complete liars, or completely and utterly incompetent, and should be fired. One or the other. Either they should be kicked out of their jobs, or they should be arrested for incompetence, or they should be arrested for deliberately lying about this, because millions of people have been killed in wars when they could have been deterred credibly, and they just been keeping it all secret, not telling the government. This happened in the 1930s too, with the gas warfare thing. 1927, Philip Noel Baker gave a lying speech on BBC Radio, February 1927, modern weapons and how they affect us, claiming there's no protection possible against gas, and everyone has agreed on that. Complete liar, and he was debunked by the government, but in the secret reports, but the government wouldn't publish the report. It wouldn't get the BBC to retract it or do anything. And when they tried to just say, well, look, you've been putting out, the government's approach was, well, the BBC shouldn't have put out this stuff, which of course is the opposite of what I believe. Let them, what you've got to do is to come back and say, well, what are the facts? You debunk them. If someone wants to say, 1 ton of mustard gas will kill the entire world's population 1 billion times over, let them say, and then prove them wrong using data from World War I, where simple gas masks would show you took about 40 tons of mustard gas. This is shown in the book Kendall. Professor Kendall's 1938 book, Breathe Freely, took about 40 tons of mustard gas to kill one person with gas masks in World War I, even when there was no warning, when the shells, and Kendall makes it clear, this is for shells coming over before you can react. And he said, if there's an attack on a city, it takes longer for the weapon to get to you. So there's more chance of warning, so you've got longer to put on the gas mask. It's all the opposite of the bloody fucking liars from CND who should be shot or arrested. They know the truth. It's been published. It's out there. And there's a whole range of organisations lying for disarmament about weapons effects, nuclear, chemical, biological, the whole lot. And they won't credit to prevent the credible deterrence of Russia because they're pro-Russian. They love Putin. That's sick.